that's what we do. That's our mission statement. Help streamers and broadcasters to make a living by doing what they love. We enable fan funding. We enable donations and alerts. We're used by 74% of the top 10,000 Twitch streamers today, including people like Lyric, QtPie, Voyboy, a lot of sort of names you're familiar with on Overwatch, Seagull and some of the new rising stars. And I'm going to breeze through this stuff, but typically when people think about Twitch and YouTube Live and sort of streaming, they're like, yeah, esports, great. Esports is awesome. I actually used to own an esports team myself called Vulcan 3 years ago. And we were ranked number 2 in North America in the first season of LCS for League of Legends back in 2013. I get where people are coming from. There's a lot of hype around esports, right? People are like, it's on TBS. CS:GO is now on television. You hear about it in the press, and then there's a lot of viewers on Twitch. Twitch now is more than 100 million. YouTube gaming, including VODs and live, is about 8 times that number. So it's much larger than Twitch, but there is way too much hype about esports because most of the content that's consumed on live streaming is actually not esports. And this may not be news to people within the ecosystem, but for people new to live streaming, this is usually, they're surprised, when they hear about this, is most of the content on live streaming is not esports, it's individuals. And what we see is people usually tune in for esports and they usually stay for one of the other streamers. So the first time you come to Twitch or YouTube Live, it may be for like a big event, it may be for a charity fundraiser, it may be for esports, but you'll find some streamer you connect with and you'll follow him. But this is really, really interesting, and this is something nobody talks about. So I know this is the esports track, and we're in the we're in the esports room, but those numbers are straight from Twitch. And if we just follow the money, this is really interesting. This is data you're not going to see publicly available elsewhere. This is where the money is going. And you'll have these slides after the presentation. Again, these are estimates, my best guess personally, of how much money is being transacted through Twitch today. And you'll see that esports is one piece of it. Most of it, if you follow the money, follows the viewership. It's going through to individual streamers in a variety of different ways. Twitch alerts is a big segment of the tips in virtual currencies that you see up there. So that is a hard number. We know that is real, and a lot of the other numbers are just sort of informed estimates of what we see happening in the rest of the ecosystem. Subscriptions, tips, ads, sponsorships. But interesting, right? Like the money sort of follows the viewership. The trends are there. So this brings us to the meat of what we're talking about today. How does this affect what you do? Whether you are a game publisher or streamer or an esports tournament organizer or indie game developer, and there are 2 things we're going to talk about today. One is Twitch Plays X. And this is something that Twitch has done a great job sort of talking about. They have, I believe they had a session earlier today. They talked about it at GDC. Is developers are now building games that include audience participation or audience involvement that actually affects the gameplay in some way, shape, or form. There's Pokemon, right? I promised you guys some Pokemon. There may be more later. But these games are interesting examples. So, does everyone know what Twitch Plays Pokemon was? Yeah, quick show of hands. No? Few people. So Twitch Plays Pokemon is something that's been going on for a while. It is, streamers are booting up sort of really old versions of Pokemon, 8-bit graphic, 16-bit graphic versions, and Twitch chat is playing the game collectively by voting on what action should happen next. So for example, press 1 if you want the character to move up, or press 2 if you want the character to move right or left or consume a certain item or open a certain door. And over the course of several days, tens of thousands of people have played this game together. And they do this, every 6 months, every 3 months. It's a pretty regular, popular thing. So following that example, other games such as Punch Club, build audience participation straight into the game. So if I'm a streamer, Sten, let's take Sten's example, or Sten. So Sten's playing Punch Club, for example, and he's streaming on Twitch, and there are parts in the game where the audience has to vote on what's going to happen next. And so the game is sort of paused and waiting for participation and input, which is really interesting. This is interesting data that is very new, just came out a couple of weeks ago. There was a data science team that looked at this at Twitch, what percentage of game sales were attributable to live streaming and streamers actually playing the game. So you can go look at the footnotes and how they came up with these numbers, but this is really fascinating data. So about nearly 25 to 30% of the sales for culling in Punch Club were a direct result from live streaming and from streamers playing the game more and more. This is another interesting piece of data here. What does live streaming do to retention? And when we talk about growth and marketing, and okay, I've got an interesting game, I'm a game developer, how do I get more users? Often, it's not about getting more users. It's really about figuring out how to keep the users you have longer, because there is no growth without retention. If your retention sucks, doesn't really matter what you do on the marketing front, right? What sort of channels of user acquisition you have. Is a leaky bucket is going to always be a leaky bucket. So this is something that over the last couple of years, a lot of major game developers have really started to support and embrace, is they see esports for sure as a way, as sort of a re-engagement retention loop. So Riot, for example, spends upwards of $50 million a year on LCS globally, or different tournaments. And they do it primarily for retention, is to increase the shelf life of League of Legends. But outside of esports is where I think the real opportunity is. And so a lot of these numbers are from streamers playing the games. So if you go through some of these games, they don't have large esports scenes, right? So you look at H1Z1, Civ 5, it's more individuals rather than tournaments. So the first thing was really building games with audience participation that people can broadcast. This is the second thing we're talking about today, is game discovery. How many people have been watching Twitch for more than 3 years? So I don't know about you, but I'd love to hear your experience. But about 4 or 5 years ago, I used to watch StarCraft. I used to go to tournaments in person. My last StarCraft tournament was, IGN 5 in Vegas. And it was at that tournament where we were watching live streams and other things on Twitch many years ago that League of Legends started to get popular, and I had no idea what League of Legends was. I'd played Dota, I'd played sort of the custom maps in there and MOBAs, but I discovered League of Legends by watching other people play it, and the same thing happened with Hearthstone. So when Hearthstone came out, I've never played Magic. I've never really been like a card game player. But this was really interesting because I got hooked on Hearthstone many months before the release. So it was in closed beta. I just kept watching those streams because it was so fascinating. Like Hearthstone was sort of like a, this puzzle solver game, and if you do X, I do Y. So I learned what every single card in Hearthstone did before the game came out by watching hours and hours of the stream. So I don't know, a few hundred cards. I knew what every single card did, never played the game. Didn't have a copy of it. You couldn't play it. It was in closed beta. Eventually, I just couldn't wait anymore. I went to eBay and I purchased a beta key for $250 to go download Hearthstone 6 months before its release. And that happened because I was watching other people stream this game, and I was really fascinated by it. And so I just had to have it. And that's been true for a lot of these other titles here, is sort of the discovery loops and the retention loops are starting to move towards live streaming, and it's a big part of it. this is sort of a breakdown by rank of streamer on Twitch. These are sort of how the views break down. Now, 2 years ago, it was very, very different. Most of the views were concentrated in the top 50 or top 100 streamers. But over time, the long tail has gotten larger and larger and larger. So if you look at the data now, Twitch has some data from a year ago. This is more recent. The long tail has gotten pretty substantial. So approximately 50% of viewership is from streamers that have less than 30 viewers, which is fascinating, right? So if you let that sink in, 50% of content and viewership consumed is from really small streamers that are hard to work with, hard to reach out to. You don't even know who they are because it's so fragmented. In total, I think there's somewhere between 2 to 2.5 million streamers, registered broadcasters on Twitch, and we know of maybe a couple hundred. Again, this is really interesting data also from Twitch. So their data science team looked at who's playing what and what effect it has on game discovery and sales. And the obvious ones are at the high end. People like Lyric and Syndicate and QtPie are going to move a lot of volume. But people in the middle really are sort of this treasure trove of undiscovered opportunity, where they may have 50, 100, 200, 500, sometimes even 10 viewers. But because they're smaller, their communities are a lot more engaged, and they really listen and follow these guys. So as you think about sort of where your gaming business fits in, think about those two things. Games that have direct viewer participation. If I was a game developer and building a new game, I would absolutely think about this. The second thing I would think about is how do I use influencers for my core retention loop, for sometimes my acquisition loops, but mostly retention loops, and how do I make my long tail larger? And I think this is the big opportunity here that very few people are talking about is, obviously if you go to Lyric and you want him to play your game, or you go to somebody on YouTube, the cost is enormous. But over 90% of these people have no sponsorships. So if they have 50 viewers, chances are they're too small for a typical sponsor to care. And logistically, it's impossible to work with that many streamers, right? So we've sponsored streamers before in the past. Last year, we had a big marketing budget for one of our other in-house products. We worked with about 100 different streamers. I had a team of 4 people, and full time they were just working with streamers. And even though there were 4 people, it was hard to work with more than 100 streamers because the process is so cumbersome. It is so manual. You kind of have to reach out, coach, talk to each person, negotiate deals. It's a huge pain in the backside, which is why most streamers don't have sponsorships, and that I think is an interesting opportunity. This is something we're experimenting with as well. Is can we make this available to small, medium streamers? We have about that's sort of what it looks like right now. We're playing with this. Happy to talk about it more if you want. And thank you. I think we've finished in time, right? Thank you.
Could you tell us a little bit more about this programmatic live inventory you have?
How do is there some sort of a marketing product that we can make available to streamers on Twitch? Yeah, it's in closed beta right now. There's a little link, and there's a video that plays under the link. The problem with Twitch, unlike YouTube, is there's nothing to click on, right? So Twitch alerts is pretty cool because we get encoded into the video before the video feed leaves the computer and goes to Twitch or YouTube or Azubu or Hitbox or whatever. So we can put anything on the screen that an advertiser wants at any place, but we can't make it clickable. So one of the interesting things you'll see there that I didn't realize was even possible, but it's kind of working, is there's a link there, .something.gg/ name of streamer. So people are actually typing that link in. They're opening up their browser, phone or desktop, and they're actually typing that link in. Obviously not 100% people do it, but as long as it's interesting enough, they do it.
So since you're embedding ads into the stream that's not typically controlled by the streamer, what's the community reaction, what's the streamer reaction to basically advertising directly?
So in that particular example, it is approved by the streamer. They have to go and sort of approve every single thing that shows up, because streamers are very protective of their streams, rightly so. I think Twitch is a more challenging channel than Instagram or YouTube or Twitter, and we don't do anything on any of those other channels. But Twitch is sort of it's sort of this community. They've got their pitchforks and they're like ready to burn you at the stake. And, 80% of them use ad block. It's that group of people, so you have to be really careful. I think the product has to be a good match for the stream. The streamer has to believe in it, and they have to support it, obviously. So that's what we're finding so far. Like, this is just a side experiment we're doing right now. Most of our business is still tips and donations.